Coming up, the University of Cape Town's Academic Union will next week meet with CCMA over the looming strike. We speak to Kelly Malt, leader of the Academics Union salary bargaining team. And human rights lawyer Thulani Masego has been shot dead at his home in Luyengo, south of Mbabane in Eswatini. We speak to SABC News international editor Sophie Mukwena on this and other international stories. Well, hello and welcome. We are live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you for tuning into the week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson, where, as always, you can interact with us on our various social media platforms using @TheWeekAhead or using the hashtag #TheWeekAhead. Let's get straight into it. Right, we start off by taking a look at these stories. 2023 is expected to be a busy one. This is political parties gear up for what could be watershed elections in the next year. The Democratic Alliance is preparing for its elective Congress, which is 2 months away. The positions of federal leader, federal chair and federal council chair are all up for grabs. The Economic Freedom Fighters, the third biggest political party in the country, will celebrate a decade of its existence.
The main opposition's elective Congress is just 2 weeks away. It will take place from the 1st to the 2nd of April at the Gallagher Convention Centre in Midrand, Gauteng. The DA is expected to elect a new crop of leaders to take on the governing ANC next year. Last year, the incumbent, John Steenhuisen, made his intentions clear that he was available for re-election. It appears several other names have also been touted for that position, but they are yet to be confirmed. The newly elected leaders will be expected to get a renewed mandate from the party's members as to the direction it must take before the 2024 polls.
This will be the Congress where we will be electing the DA federal leader, the DA federal chairperson, and the DA federal council chairperson, and the deputies to those positions. It is quite an important Congress as it comes a year ahead of the upcoming national and provincial elections. So it is important that the leadership of the party gets a renewed mandate from the members and the delegates so that we can go into the campaign with a leadership that has been elected and that has been given a mandate. And this Congress comes on the backdrop of serious inroads that the party has made to recover and to stabilize on the back foot of the electoral performance we had in 2019, and we've seen some recovery that manifested itself in the performance of the party's electoral performance in the 2021 elections, and we've had a series of by-election victories that showcases that the Democratic Alliance is on the right track to consolidate its state as the official opposition and a party of governance.
Meanwhile, the EFF, which had reached its target of recruiting 1 million members, will mark 10 years of its existence this year. The party was founded in July 2013 after Malema was expelled as an ANC member. Its electoral support has been on an upward trajectory, and in the last municipal elections, the party attained 10.4% compared to the 8.19% it received in 2016.
This is significant to us and is a significant year for the organization because we get to reflect on the impact that we've had on the lives of our people, how we've inspired our people to stand up against injustice, against racism and abuse in all sectors of society, how we've inspired our people to stand up against exploitation in the workplace. And that is one of the most compelling achievements of the organization, is that we've been able to raise the consciousness of our people to be able to respond to their conditions. We've been able to show our people that there is an alternative outside of the so-called former liberation movement, which blackmails them into constantly voting them because of their apartheid struggles. And we expect the year to be the stepping stone and the stepping ladder towards the governance of the EFF in 2024.
One expert has weighed in on the significance of both parties' events.
You don't need a situation where leaders, like it has happened in the Democratic Alliance, would have to be removed from positions or assessed in public and get humiliated about their performance like it has actually happened in the past. Democratic Alliance to have a healthy contestation, but equally they should find ways and means to protect their leaders from public humiliation. They have actually reached their target of having 1 million members. The EFF is represented in a number of municipalities in South Africa. So there are all reasons for the EFF to celebrate. And this, in my view, has a potential to give the EFF more strength to do much better and build a much bigger and stronger organization.
As the 2024 elections draw near, both parties will be working the ground to ensure they unseat the ANC government. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Meanwhile, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to deliver the closing statement at the ANC's Free State Provincial Conference. More than 600 delegates attended the conference, which had a shaky start on Friday. Perhaps for this and more, we're joined by SABC News reporter Aphumelele Mtlalane. A very good afternoon to you, Aphumelele. Thank you for joining us. Perhaps you can just briefly bring us up to speed with developments on your end before the address by President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Well, I can indicate that the voting process is officially closed and the counting is underway. We're expecting the results of the top 5 in no time from now. I must indicate also that it's a smooth day today, unlike on Friday when we saw some delegates, of course, clashing with the police. The NEC member also did indicate, David Mahlobo, that they will make sure that this conference goes according to the program, even though they are being delayed here and there. But just to give us, or rather keep us up to speed about today's program, I'm joined by the IPC spokesperson, Tate Khwabane. Thank you for your time. We've heard from David Mahlobo that everything is running smooth and we are expecting results later on today. Tell us what has been happening throughout the morning.
Thank you. This morning we completed, with the voting, and as we said, the counting is underway. Now, in the main conference venue, we have started with the discussion documents, and so that we then develop resolutions. So that's exactly what we are doing. Different presenters are presenting to the plenary, and then having discussions and taking resolutions. Like we said, we customize those national resolutions to our own situation, so that we then have our resolutions being in harmony with the national resolution. So, and that's what we are doing at the moment.
And the nomination process last night was rather delayed by some disputes. Take us through to that process and how was it solved?
Once you resolve, take resolutions on the credentials, you cannot change that resolution that you have taken. So the only issue that people were raising were that, based on the decisions that had already been taken by the dispute resolution committee, the people had realized that some of those things had not been effected. So that's why they were saying, before we can move forward with nominations and what, let those decisions be effected, like where people, appropriate delegates, were supposed to be duly accredited. That thing must happen, and that's exactly what was happening. It was just to re-emphasize the decisions that were taken, and that's what was done. It was not even to change the credentials because we had already resolved on the credentials report.
And processes were delayed until now, and we heard Mahlobo indicating that the steering committee will therefore have to meet and decide whether this conference will be ending today. Are we really expecting President to close today?
Yes, we expect the President to come today and close the conference. We had scheduled the conference to end today. So, once we have elected the new leadership, there are many things that we can do. Either we extend the days, or the new leadership is charged with the responsibility of completing the conference by organizing another session to finish the discussion documents and take resolutions. And the key issue of this type of a conference is election of leadership, which is the one that troubles or gives more trouble to the progress of this Congress, so that key issues like resolutions suffers as a result. So the new leadership may be charged with that responsibility to ensure that they convene a session where decisions will be taken, and those decisions will then instruct this new leadership for the next 4 years.
And from now on, for how long maybe are we supposed to wait for the results to be announced?
I think the time will be determined by what is happening in the counting, and that can only be dictated to by the elections agency. So that process is in the hands of that independent body. They are the ones who will determine when are they ready, when can the results be announced. And that we cannot say at the moment. We had expected, as they had promised, that it could be done in 2 hours. But obviously that was not the case. So we are just awaiting their indication as to when are they ready to announce the results. But remember that immediately after the results have been announced, nominations for the additional members will immediately start. There wouldn't be any break in between.
Thank you so much. That is, of course, the IPC NC spokesperson here in the province of Bakwabane, keeping us up to speed. Also indicating that the program is rather delayed, but confidently saying that President Cyril Ramaphosa will have to close this conference later on today. We still have to wait to hear, of course, who has emerged now in the top 5, knowing that for, of course, the chairperson, we have Mxolisi Dukwana, and who's currently the convener of the party, and also we have CC and Ntombela, who's currently the premier in the province. We'll just be an eye and ear until then, so that we can, of course, know the program. Therefore, later on, as we also expecting the additional members to, of course, be voted for, and now later on, the president is expected to be closing the conference.
Mlalani, thank you very much for that update. A story we will continue to monitor. Again, the ANC Free State conference underway. They're just getting a brief update rather from Apumelele. In other news making headlines, the University of Cape Town's Academic Union will next week meet with CCMA over the looming strike. This comes after the wage negotiations reached a deadlock. The Academics Union, representing the majority of academic staff, polled its members on the possibility of embarking on strike action, and almost 9 out of 10 members voted in favor of the strike. Now, the university will go on strike for the first time since the university's history. But to weigh in on this, for a discussion, Kelly Malt, leader of the Academics Union Salary Bargaining Team, joins us. A very good afternoon to you, Kelly. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
Thank you for having me.
Perhaps you can just give us an update on your end regarding the negotiation process. When did you learn that the employer, which obviously is the university, is offering a 3% and nothing more? Perhaps let's start there.
Sure. So the university gave us the offer of a 3% increase on the 30th of November of last year. We held a members' vote, and 99% of our members voted to reject the university's offer. The reason for rejecting the offer is that 3% is less than half of current inflation, which is set at 6.9%. It is also much lower than our competitor institutions, who have all increased or agreed to wage increases of 6% and above. Academic pay at UCT is regulated by pay policy, which is agreed between the union and management, and which sets our salaries at a benchmark at the 75th percentile of a group of comparator institutions. If we were to take a 3% increase, our members would not only be poorer off in their pockets in real terms for this year, for the third year in a row. Academics have agreed to increases that ended up below inflation for the last 3 years. But it will also move us significantly off of that benchmark. Some of our academic ranks would be 10% below. So for us, that's a big concern. It's a concern for being able to attract great staff to UCT, to be able to keep great staff at UCT, and significantly undermines the transformation project at our university.
Kelly, the university says that it is doing everything in its power to avert the strike. Is it unusual for UCT to have deadlocks with unions at this point of the year?
We disagree with much of what has been placed in the public domain in that statement which you referenced. In our view, the university left it way too late to start bargaining with the academics union. The university produced a schedule for bargaining, which was due to start around May and conclude in October. In fact, they came to us with an offer for the first time on the 30th of November. We then met with them numerous times between the 1st of December, when we communicated that our members had rejected the offer, to the 15th of December. We had numerous promises for a revised offer, which was imminently going to be served to us. Today is the 22nd of January, and we don't have a revised offer. That is after hours and hours and hours of meetings with management, promises that have consistently been broken. So management has started behind their own schedule. They left it to an extraordinarily busy time of the year. We notified them that we would approach the CCMA on the 15th of December, which is what we did. We met them on the 9th of January at the CCMA for conciliation. The management's representative promised that a revised offer would be coming on the 10th. It didn't come. We met them again on the 12th. They arrived with no revised offer. Since the 12th, we have spent just over a week negotiating over the strike rules, which were finally signed on Friday. So in our view, management has had ample time to revise its offer. This is not the way that negotiations with the academics union have traditionally gone. I've been negotiating at UCT for a very long time. And, until quite recently, our negotiations took a couple of meetings over a week or two, were very collegial. Because academics care very deeply about the institution, we understand the funding constraints that in which we're operating. But this time, all of our efforts have not worked. And so we are left with no option but to seek redress at the CCMA with issuing a strike certificate and going out on strike as soon as we can.
All right, so just for clarity's sake, with 9 out of 10 members having voted in favor of embarking on the strike, does it mean that workers can't take the 3% offer at this point that is on the table? And have you received the strike certificate?
So we have not received the strike certificate. We've been asked to attend another conciliation on Monday, Monday or Tuesday, which we will do. We expect that after that, if there is an agreement, we will receive the strike certificate. We will then give the university the required 48 hours notice of an impending strike and move forward with action. Our demand to UCT was an increase of 7.1%. which is what is required to keep academics at our benchmark. So you can see there's a lot of distance between 3% and 7.1. And since we've been able to make absolutely no progress in 8 weeks since our members rejected the offer, we don't hold much hope at this stage that that a palatable revised offer will emanate. Our members are not willing to take the 3% increase and stand firm on that position. So, we remain open to any offer which management brings us that improves on the 3% offer, but at the same time are cognizant of the fact that our competitor institutions have managed to increase their staff wages by at least 6%. And so for us, that's a critical consideration.
All right, thank you for that clarity. I just wonder on the back of that, should the strike continue? I mean, it said that it's the first time in the university's history for workers to embark on a strike. And I wonder how this is going to affect the image of the institution. Let me also bring in the other factor that stands to obviously be impacted, operations, especially with the new academic intake. Walk us through what's what the concerns are on that front.
Absolutely. So you're right, this is absolutely unprecedented. Never in the history of the university have academics gone on strike. And that's because academics in general are quite a community with a diversity of ideas. We care very deeply about our students. We've worked tirelessly over many years, but especially since 2020 and COVID-19, with just really holding the university together and doing what we can to make sure that our students succeed. So to be at a place where 87% of our members are behind a strike is really momentous and tells you what the kind of climate on campus is. We haven't taken the decision lightly. There will undoubtedly be disruption to the university calendar. We are currently marking and finalizing supplementary and deferred examinations that close off the 2022 academic year. We're also embarking on student registrations for both new and returning students in the next weeks. And without academics, those will not be able to take place. And of course, teaching is scheduled to start on the 13th of February, which is another obviously important day for the calendar. We are concerned about the impact on the institution and on students, but we also know that our institution does adjust. In the many years that we've had student protests or other delays caused by the fire and other events, we have been able to shift the university calendar, and academics are in part what has worked really hard to make sure that we can make up for those delays. And I'm sure that if there's a similar delay, we will have to make those kind of arrangements again.
Katie, just in conclusion, looking at what's at stake, in the vote taken by the members of the AU this week, 87% expressed support for the 3-day strike with potential for further strikes. I mean, this is obviously upon the CCMA issuing the strike certificate. Mm-hmm. I just wonder, if the strike is meant to last for 3 days, is this so even if demands of the members are not met in this case? I'm just trying to understand where to from here, given the negotiation process and really what's at stake for 2023 and beyond. What's the deeper seated issues that's being challenged at this point?
Sure. So the deeper seated, the issue, the immediate issue is obviously a salary increase, but that is indicative of an impasse in the relationship in the way that the university prioritizes the academic project in its budget. There's 244 million rand of strategic spend that is included in the budget. There's a large increase in student fees. There are building projects. There are all kinds of things in the budget. So to continue on with an expansion of those kind of projects, or to continue with non-recurrent items that have stayed on the budget for numerous years, in effect becoming recurrent items, but wanting to balance those books off the back of academics, to us doesn't recognize the valuable role that academics play as the center of the university. We can have wonderful facilities and amazing students, but if we don't have academics in the classroom doing research, teaching the next generation of academics, igniting passion in them, solving the society's problems, we really have very little of a university left. So for us, this is also about the recognition of the central role of academics, what we bring to the university, and how we will continue to engage with management in a respectful, collegial relationship as we have traditionally enjoyed.
All right, Kelly, we have run out of time, but we'll leave the conversation there. Again, story we'll be monitoring throughout the week. Kelly Malt, leader of the Academics Union Salary Bargaining Team, chatting to us about the looming strike at the University of Cape Town. They're waiting for the strike certificate. Perhaps once the university, once received, obviously they'll give the university 48 hours notice. Again, story monitoring here on the SABC News channel. Thank you to Kelly for her time. Staying with education, Dr. Petiwe Matutu, CEO of University South Africa, now joins us to speak about universities and higher institutions of learning for the academic year of 2023 and beyond. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Petiwe. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, Lizel, and good afternoon to the viewers.
Let me just get your thoughts on the looming strike that is set to take place at UCT. Given the timing, the demands, and perhaps what's at stake, how would you weigh in on what's unfolding with that negotiation process to date?
It is unfortunate that it is happening at this busy time of the year. And as University of South Africa, we don't normally meddle in the running of the individual institutions unless we have been mandated by our leadership to focus at a collective aspect. And where we have been mandated by the leadership of the higher education sector to come in was to look at the student debt component, because that is an indication of how high or how far the increases in accommodation together with tuition fees have gone to the point of unaffordability for some of the student sector. That is where we have been requested to come in. And so universities just do not have the powers to just raise those fees. So apparently, it looks like the staff within UCT has looked at all of that, has looked at the expenditure, has looked at where money can come from. But certainly, one cannot just look at the increase, which is usually the second string income of the university.
All right, thank you very much for those thoughts on that pending matter. Perhaps as we also look at the class of 2022, matriculated and obviously now going to enter high institutions of learning and universities. What's your take on that, given the results of an increase in the bachelor pass rates for the year?
That is positive news, Lisa. I'm quite excited to hear about the increase in the matric pass rate, and specifically the bachelor passes. And that is quite commendable, particularly in light of what has happened over the past few years, where we've had the COVID pandemic, and these are the same learners who had suffered all kinds of loss. And the fact that they have done so well attests to the resilience of our systems, the teachers, administrators, parents, together with the learners.
Yeah, absolutely, which probably allows us to take the conversation further, because then one is to look at the readiness of learners, perhaps from high school, that shift into university, high institutions of learning, what's required, just given the modes of learning and operating on the back of COVID-19 and beyond, but also the issue of placements and resources.
Looking at the higher education sector, it has been highlighted by the higher education management and information system that the approximation of the possible intake of new students stands at about 196,000 and some 300. So looking at the pass, the bachelor passes, as where we stand now was sitting at about 278,000. So there are certainly more than that number, and some of the diploma passes, they end up within the university sector. Certainly there's a high demand for higher education. However, there are other sectors as well. There's the private sector within the higher education. There are TVET colleges, and some of the institutions, some of the students will end up there. Even within the higher education sector, you'll find out that the entry requirements are much higher than what some of the bachelor passes have been able to achieve. And there is a plan to expand the higher education sector. As we have seen, the National Development Plan is looking at a target of about 1.6 million by 2030. We're sitting at 1.1 million or so right now. So there is that plan in place, and which needs to be married, of course, with the quality of the graduates which can come in. So the expansion is on the card. There's been a lot of expansion already.
Yep. How would the impact of load shedding and perhaps also on the back of COVID-19, having impacted the modus operandi, impact modes of learning going forward, also addressing the digital divide and resources in that regard?
Load shedding is a problem. I was supposed to have a meeting on Friday with some international people who were in Durban. That meeting did not occur. They could not connect for whatever reason. That is a serious concern. I've got a battery in my house. I've got everything that is supposed to be working. So the network, the poor network, it does affect transmission. So when you look at universities, you can see that they have been catapulted into being able to teach virtually, together with the students who have been given devices to do so. So load shedding is just jeopardizing all of that, in that the networks just go down. And even physically, it is difficult for some institutions to just stay with a diesel or petrol all the time. It's not something that is well planned for, and it is quite expensive. So we do need a solution to load shedding, a much more long-term solution to load shedding.
Yes, it does, impact operation costs. Perhaps for those who have poor network, it also jeopardizes the credibility of what's submitted, online exam processes, amongst others. But just very quickly, you spoke about expansion, and I just wanted to look at, the faculties or the chosen qualifications that the new intake want to perhaps get into, perhaps how that's aligned to, gearing South Africa for obtaining skills for the future, allowing us as a country to compete globally, competitively. How would you also weigh in on that, given the fourth industrial revolution and the changes occurring?
So far, the issue of supply and demand in terms of the offerings of the skill is not anything that we have focused on as higher education. What we have focused on is a balanced undergraduate degree where students are taught how to think and are taught to be innovative. So what has happened is that we've added other aspects like entrepreneurship, like the technical element, being savvy technologically within the existing offerings. And our focus has largely been on kind of multidisciplinary kind of approach and interdisciplinary work in terms of attacking our local and international programs.
All right.
So there isn't a particular focus on, let's focus on ICT or else. There has been, however, a focus on saying, let's focus on the digital skills. Let's develop these within rural institutions, within urban institutions. So there has been that focus. So you'll find that there's a digital skills a national program which is being run at various universities, which would include vendor, including vets, including a whole lot of other institutions. So that has happened.
All right, so it just probably speaks to the timing and the rollout thereof that is probably coming up at this point. But we'll leave that conversation there. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Petiwe Matutu, CEO of University of South Africa, weighing in on universities and high institutions of learning for the academic year, which obviously kicks off for the year of 2023 and beyond. Again, thank you to her for her time. Let's take a quick ad break and continue with some international news on the other side of this ad break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson, continues. It's going to be a busy week for the international team at the SABC this week. South African government will host 2 high-profile government officials from the United States of America and Russia. The Russian Federation Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov is expected to meet International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor tomorrow, whilst Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will be hosting his U.S. counterpart, Janet Yellen. Now, there was also breaking news earlier on from Eswatini, where a human rights lawyer was killed. Now, the other news is that the recent statement made by Kenyan former Minister Raila Odinga in relation to elections in Africa also came to the fore. So to discuss this, we're joined by SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. A very good afternoon to you, Sophie. Thank you for your time here.
Thank you.
Perhaps we can start off with the news that came in earlier today. Eswatini and the killing of human rights lawyer and pro-democracy activist Thulani Maseko of Eswatini. How's the news been received in terms of a response from government, perpetrators, and a motive? What's been unearthed at this point?
Well, there has been a condemnation of what has transpired in Eswatini, as we are aware that the political tension has escalated after the assassination of this human rights lawyer, Thulani Maseko, who is also an activist in that country. We had organizations representing different groups in relation to human rights talking about this issue. Earlier on, Professor Ibo Mandaza in Zimbabwe was also speaking to SABC about this incident. This has actually highlighted a problem in Eswatini, and it looks like SADC is not doing enough to address the current political tension in Eswatini that has escalated to violent activities. And we know that he is not the only person who has passed on in Eswatini after being killed or assassinated. There are other people who have been killed, members of the pro-democracy group, while others have been sent to prison. And he was playing a prominent role to represent those activists. And therefore, you can see that the intention was to muzzle those who are continuing to question the legitimacy of the Eswatini government, particularly King Mswati as the absolute monarch in that country.
Well, speaking of a response, has SADC then come out to say anything? What should be done? Any reactions from the international community at large?
Well, nothing from SADC yet. You know that the chairperson of the SADC Troika on politics, defense and security is President Hage Geingob of Namibia. The last time I heard from him, particularly through his spokesperson, was during the recent video that made the rounds of a South African National Defence Force member who's part of the contingent in Mozambique, taking videos of people who were killed in Mozambique and were burned to ashes. And therefore, that was the last statement we had from the SADC Troika chair, that is President Hage Geingob. Maybe tomorrow we are likely to see a statement from SADC or from the Secretary of SADC in terms of what's happening in Eswatini, because this is going to escalate tension. And we heard earlier on, I was speaking to some people in Eswatini, the journalists, saying that the person, an eyewitness, has fled the country, and I have no doubt that he might be somewhere in Mpumalanga or somewhere in South Africa after fleeing the country. The person who saw what happened. There are visuals and video that is doing the rounds, quite terrible pictures when you look at it. We can't even broadcast the material because it's quite graphic.
Well, that's certainly a developing story we'll continue to monitor. Perhaps as we turn to South Africa, on that note, on Monday, Russian senior diplomat Sergei Lavrov will be in the country. It's the first time that he'll be visiting, perhaps since his country invaded the Ukraine. What really is on the agenda?
Well, clearly it's strengthening the relations between Moscow and Pretoria. You know that South Africa and Russia has strong relations that dates back to exile years when you still had the Soviet Union, and the relations are continuing. There's pressure on South Africa to kind of condemn Russia in relation to the war in Ukraine, and South Africa has chosen to take a more reconciliatory part and also a neutral part, calling on stakeholders or the two countries to engage in the negotiations with the intention to arrive at a peaceful solution. But the Western powers are hard on South Africa, insisting that South Africa must condemn Russia. And we've seen diplomatic shuttling of different leaders from different parts of the world coming to South Africa last year, and the issue of war in Ukraine and Russia in particular was high on the agenda. And I think this time around, Russia is taking this opportunity to come and present their case, but also lobby South Africa to continue to support Russia at the multilateral level and other groups. You know that South Africa is a member of BRICS. Currently, the president is chairing the group's nations, and therefore South Africa will be hosting the BRICS summit. And you know that you expect heads of state from those countries, that is Brazil, South Africa, Brazil, India, China and Russia, to be in the country for that summit. But it's not clear whether President Vladimir Putin will come or attend that meeting based on the security challenges. You know that it will be difficult for him to use the Europe space. He will have to use Asia and then North Africa and down south if he is to attend that summit. And therefore, we'll get better information tomorrow when Minister of International Relations Naledi Pandor engage with Sergei Lavrov. And I think Lavrov is expected to arrive in the country today, but the embassy is quite mum in terms of his itinerary, and it is very difficult to speak to the embassy, and it is understandable. It is issues of security, because currently Russia has got many enemies.
Well, speaking of which, there's obviously a shift in the geopolitical landscape, and some have dubbed, these visits as a new scramble for Africa. So I just wonder, on the back of that, what other countries in Africa will Lavrov be expected to visit? But in the same breath, will African countries continue to support, to collaborate with Russia and with Moscow, given these sanctions that had been put up by the West? How is this also going to influence dynamics?
Well, many countries on the continent do support Russia. You know that when resolutions were presented, either in the Security Council or in the General Assembly of the United Nations, the African countries' majority have been speaking in one voice, deciding to abstain and not supporting either party. And therefore, you expect the same. For now, the African countries' majority, they don't want to take sides. And therefore, South Africa, we know the South African position. The president has communicated that on many occasions. We know even next month there's going to be a military exercise with the military or the naval vessel from Russia and also from China. The exercise that has attracted many reactions, people questioning why South Africa would allow Russia in our waters at the time where there's a war in Ukraine, but South Africa making it clear that they've done these kinds of exercise with many other countries, even though those countries were facing criticism. And therefore, you can see South Africa's position, and that's the view from some of African countries. And I expect the same. It's not clear whether Lavrov will visit other African countries. For now, I know that he is coming to South Africa, is arriving today. He will be at OR Tambo House, the headquarters of DERCO in Pretoria tomorrow, engaging with the minister. And I suspect that he will also have an audience with the president, much as the president is not his counterpart. The president's counterpart is Vladimir Putin. But because of the nature of the relationship between the two countries and the current issues around Russia, Lavrov might be having a letter or a message to convey to the president.
Oh, Sophie, on the back of that, the United States Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, also expected to arrive in South Africa on Tuesday. What's the purpose of this visit?
Well, earlier on, Janet Yellen pointed out that America wants to strengthen its relations with Africa, saying that in the coming years, this is the growing economy in this region, that is Africa. And therefore, America is positioning itself. You know that during Donald Trump's tenure, the relationship between the U.S. and Russia and South Africa, including the other African countries or the continent as a whole, was quite cold. And therefore, with Joe Biden, he's trying to rekindle that relationship. You know, last year, the Secretary of State visited South Africa, and now it is the person who's in charge of the Treasury in the United States of America. And the focus will be trade and investment and other thorny issues such as the war in Ukraine, the issue of just energy transition, and the loan that has been given to South Africa, while South Africa is still looking at whether to tap into that resource, because when you look at how it's structured, it is 90% loans, not grants. And therefore, South Africa will have a problem to pay back that money, and therefore there are negotiations. And I think that kind of those kinds of talks will continue with the Minister of Finance in South Africa, Eno Godongwane, who will be meeting her counterpart, Janet Yellen, on the 24th, that is on Tuesday. And this will be her final stop on the continent. She was in Senegal. Tomorrow she is in Zambia, and of course she will then come to South Africa. I also suspect that Yellen would also want to have an audience with President Ramaphosa, because this is a high-profile official from the Biden administration, and all this it paves way for Biden to visit the continent. We don't know whether among countries that will be visited by Joe Biden this year, that includes South Africa, but I have no doubt that, judging from what has transpired with the Secretary of State last year, Janet Yellen now, I think South Africa is going to be part of those countries that Joe Biden will visit this year.
Yes, but perhaps as we wrap up, though, you also spoke to former Kenyan Prime Minister Odinga on a range of issues, and it seemed like he was still aggrieved by some of the outcomes of the elections in the country. Can you tell us what came out of that interview?
Quite an interesting interview. We were focusing on infrastructure on the continent. As you know, that he has been appointed by the AU to look at possibility of improving infrastructure on the continent as a retired politician in terms of office, but still leading his political party in Kenya. And he spoke about that, but also I had to ask him about his political future, and he pointed out that he will be guided by the Kenyans, non-committal in terms of retirement, while many people are saying it is time for him to retire in terms of full-time politics and leading a party. He also was very, very strong, calling on the African leaders to look at the use of electronic voting system, saying that it is prone to corruption and abuse, and almost saying that, but very firm that he still don't agree that he has lost elections in Kenya. And I think this is not going to sit well with the current president, William Ruto. We are going to try and get the office of the president, President William Ruto in particular, to respond to this, because we will ensure that we do balance the story. But for now, what we have is it is Raila Odinga very scathing happening in terms of electoral processes in Kenya. For some, people are saying that it's too little, too late, and he must just accept and move on.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much for your time. Sophie Mokoena, SABC News International Editor, weighing in on what we can expect for the International News Diary for the week ahead. We'll leave that conversation there, take another ad break, and continue with more news on the other side. Welcome back. In other news, the Eskom CEO, Andre de Ruyter, says they will reduce the stages of rolling blackouts this coming week because generation capacity is improving and they have managed to buy enough diesel. Meanwhile, de Ruyter says that the Kusile Power Station's Unit 5 is expected to be synchronized to the grid in July. This will add 700 megawatts to the grid. De Ruyter also says that he understands the frustrations of South Africans as Eskom subjects them to rolling blackouts, which are currently at stage 2. He says they're engaging different stakeholders in an effort to address the electricity crisis.
This is highly regrettable, and I can give the country the assurance that the Eskom team is hard at work in collaboration with the National Electricity Crisis Committee, as well as with our partners in various government departments, to address the issues that have led us to the current situation and to find sustainable solutions going forward. The first matter that is enjoying urgent attention is our energy availability factor. This has, during the past weeks, reached new lows. A lot of it attributable to the failure of 3 units at Kusile, as well as extremely high levels of planned maintenance that we have carried out. The acting Group Executive for Generation, Mr. Thomas Conradi, will give you more color on the exact details. But these are steps, particularly with planned maintenance, that are vital to restoring the integrity of our system, and therefore we do not wish to compromise on executing our program of planned maintenance.
While staying with energy news, government says that progress is being made with the implementation of its energy action plan aimed at resolving the country's electricity supply crisis. In the National Energy Crisis Committee, NECOM's 6-month progress update, government says the power system remains constrained in the short term, but planned measures will reduce the frequency as well as severity of load shedding as new capacity is brought online. Eskom has meanwhile reduced rolling blackouts to stage 2 from 5 a.m. this morning.
As the country continues to suffer from devastating rolling blackouts, government says measures to ease the problem are taking shape. It says the short-term objectives of the Energy Action Plan is to reduce the severity and frequency of load shedding through immediate measures to improve the performance of Eskom's existing power stations. The long-term objective is to end load shedding altogether and achieve energy security by adding new generation capacity to the grid. It says its achievements in the past 6 months include Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act has been amended to remove the licensing requirement for generation projects, which it says will significantly accelerate private investment. It also says the National Energy Crisis Committee has instructed departments to cut the red tape and streamline regulatory processes for energy projects, including reducing the timeframe for environmental authorizations to 57 days from over 100 days. It also says a team of independent experts has been established to work closely with Eskom to diagnose the problems of poorly performing power stations and take action to improve plant performance. It says also that the President has instructed law enforcement agencies to ramp up efforts to protect electricity infrastructure. Spokesperson for the President, Vincent Magwinya, says addressing the ongoing electricity crisis remains government's single most important priority.
South Africans are right to demand immediate action to address the devastating impact of load shedding on our lives and on the economy. The Energy Action Plan provides a clear way out of this crisis. South Africa does not need any new plans. We are focusing on implementing this plan fully and effectively to achieve energy security for all South Africans.
Energy expert Ted Blom says while these are steps in the right direction, more can still be done.
The suggestions I've got is the first one is tax incentives. There's no mention of tax incentives. Now, expecting households to join and invest in grid or infrastructure or rooftop solar will be greatly enhanced if we offer tax incentives to those households. Then those households could generate between 4 and 6 gigawatts of additional power within 90 days. It could really be very quick because everybody would get their own supplier, so there won't be any bottlenecks. So that would certainly help to reduce daytime load shedding.
Government says other solutions include a plan for Eskom to import power from neighboring countries through the Southern African Power Pool. It says Eskom will also use interim power solutions such as mobile generators to supplement current generation capacity. Furthermore, Eskom has launched an emergency generation program to procure additional power when the grid is significantly constrained. Gloria Sefakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Oh, that's where we leave it for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Of course, we are back next week for a look at the weekend review. Until then, for myself and the team, it is goodbye for now.